doing policy-relevant research on various aspects of sustainable development. In particular, it has a long tradition of research on SSE, and it is the implementing agency of the Knowledge Hub of the UN Interagency Task Force on SSE, or UNTFSSE. As the implementer of the Knowledge Hub, UNRIST carried out the UNTFSSE project entitled Opportunities and Challenges of Statistics on SSE, and we are going to present its first showcase of the produced papers. I'm very much proud to say that we have today the authors of these papers, good maîtres or intellectual avengers. We are with Marie Bouchard, full professor at University of Quebec in Montreal, Canada, and Syriac chair of the Scientific Commission on the Social and Cooperative Economy. Marie, who also served as the external coordinator for this project, is going to talk about producing statistics on social and solidarity economy. And we have Jérôme Schumacher, who is professor at the Haute École de la Ville de Liege, Belgium, and the project manager of Syriac. Jérôme is going to talk about mapping international mapping exercises. And last but not least, we have Rafael Chavez, senior professor at the University of Valencia. Rafael is going to talk about policy recommendations and directions for future research. Before we move on to the presentations, I'd like to invite Vic van Buren, Director of the Enterprise Department of ILO. Vic is leading the SSE initiatives within the UN system as the chair of the UNTFSSE. Vic, over to you.
Thank you, Yochong. And yes, we have a small group, and hopefully as people join, we can have more people participating. I'm very pleased to be part of this 8th EMS or EMES International Research Conference and have the opportunity to spell out some of the work of what the UN Task Force is doing. But in the area that the experts are going to be talking, I would learn more than I would be able to present on. So mine is going to be just presenting the broad framework of some of the things that we've been doing. The UN Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy aims to raise the visibility of the SSE within the UN system and beyond. And I'm a firm believer that we haven't been branding the SSE enough, and we talk to each other about what's happening, and the time has come for us to brand the SSE much stronger. The members and observers of the task force have been committed to undertake collaborative activities to firstly enhance the recognition of the role of SSE enterprises and organizations in sustainable development, promoting the knowledge of SSE and consolidate networks, and support the establishment of an enabling institutional and policy environment. And lastly, we need to ensure the coordination of international efforts and create and strengthen partnerships. The task force is made up of 18 UN agencies and the OECD. And of the civil society, we've got 14 organizations that represent research institutes and other civil society organizations who act as observers, such as EMES, Syriac, Eurixe, and we have a rotational chair. So next year will be my time to move on, and we'll find someone else to take over from me. We've got a plan of action, and in Trento in 2019, we put together a strategic plan, and we tried to keep it very focused so that we didn't try and do everything. And we've got 3 priority objectives. The one is to try and support the governments who are looking to have a resolution on the social and solidarity economy. It's taking a bit of time as governments start lobbying with each other and getting this on track. But we've been helping and advising with regards to the text of what could be in a UN General Assembly debate. Then on the SSE for SDGs, we've recognized that at government level, there are a lot of challenges in the developing economies. We don't have regulatory frameworks that are supportive of SSE, and this is often seen on the periphery, and we battle to get some substantive issues going. We've got to move from SSEs out of necessity to rather having SSEs of opportunity, where this is a driving force in line with the SDGs. And so we've developed a program which we're now discussing with the EU at the moment for funding, where we take the social and solidarity economy program to the governments and help them implement and bring about a regulatory framework that will work. Then we've got the Knowledge Hub, and that's where Ilchong and UNRUST have been key. This enhances the potential of the SSE through a Knowledge Hub for SDGs. And this was set up by the government of South Korea and the Luxembourg government, who gave us sponsorship, where we drive this knowledge platform. Through the organizations of public events and the creation of an online platform, which is now available in 4 languages, it's been possible to favor the creation of knowledge around SSE and SDGs. And we also have every second year a conference where we call for papers. This is a good example of a pilot project driven by the task force and implemented by one of the UN agencies through UNRUST. In this framework, we began a research project, Opportunities and Challenges of Statistics on SSE, funded by the Government of the Republic of Korea in 2019 and coordinated by UNRUST as the implementing agency. With the support of Syriac International and its network, the project aimed to contribute to knowledge diffusion and transfer about robust methodologies and high-quality approaches for data collection. The 3 papers on the SSE statistics, which will be presented today, have been developed in this framework, and they aim at supporting stakeholders to deepen their understanding of the methodologies on SSE and policymakers, and to establish and improve SSE statistical systems. This is so important as we go forward. Although policymakers increasingly pay attention to the SSE, organizations and enterprises in particular, their potential to address social, economic, and environmental problems in alternative ways is there, but we lack statistical information about the weight, the size, and the scope of the SSEOEs in their territory, and this often prevents them from establishing sustainable and inclusive policies for the development of SSE. The exchange among different countries is also very important. I'm coming to the end of my comments now. I don't want to hog the floor, but let me conclude by adding that we identified some topics which were deemed essential to our approach to mainstreaming SSEs. And this is at the local dimension, where we explored the localizing of the SDGs. And secondly, the area of education. We believe there's so much work that needs to be done there. My 4 sons who came through the schooling systems never knew anything about SSE when they came and went through college and university. And that's a huge question mark on the quality of our education systems in promoting the social and solidarity economy as a model that can address many of the global challenges that we currently have. And this is an area that we're going to be paying a lot more attention to, is the education. It's encouraging to see that many students and researchers from different countries are interested in the subject. So I wish you well in this session, and Ilchong and all of you. And this is a very important component, even though there may be a small group. It's extremely key to debate these issues and see how we can take it forward, particularly in the task force. Thank you very much, and over to you, Ilchong.
Thank you very much, Pik. Even though it is a small group, it is going to be recorded and published online, and a lot of people will watch your remark and our presentations. So without further ado, let's go for the first presentation. Marie, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ilchong. Thank you, Vic, for your presentation. And because I'm not a Google fan, I have to ask Ilchong to share my screen and maybe go on to the next slide if possible. So thank you for introducing this work, and thank you for having us to present it today. As mentioned by Ilchong and by Vic, this work is a 3-part work, and we're going to present some aspects of it today. My role will be to present the state of the art, or what we know about producing statistics of the SSE. Next slide, please. I did this work with Gabriel Sadeti-Beaulieu, who unfortunately is not with us today, but he will be watching on the screen later on. Next slide, please. So yes, we need statistics on the SSE, but one of the issues is that we don't have harmonized data on the SSE. Some countries have some data, some countries do not have, but moreover, we have different definitions about the SSE. It's still a concept in way of being clarified, but really it's basically that different countries have different history, and there's a progressive unfurling of the SSE that makes it different in different countries. But there is interest in having a measurement of the SSE, the size, the scope, the breadth, but we don't have the exact framework to do it. So we need to test concepts and to operationalize. I hear myself twice. Maybe Jérôme, you can cut your microphone. Thank you very much. And different approaches exist, and this discussion today is about what approach should we adopt. Next slide, please. Chong, next slide, please. Thank you. So our report, which is available online, has 7 parts. And we are going to discuss today defining the SSE for producing statistics-related guidance to measure it, and setting the perimeter of the SSE for statistical purpose. The rest of the report goes on to identifying the sources, looking at the classification and methodologies and indicators. But we will conclude this presentation with the strengths and weaknesses of approaches to SSE statistics and some recommendations. Next, please. Next, please. So if we look at different entities that are covered by legislation of SSE in different countries, we see that different types of entities can be included in the definition, the legal definition of the SSE. But in general, you have 3 types of entities that are always present, which are cooperatives, mutual societies, and nonprofit institutions or associations. The other aspects, the other entities are not always covered. But if we want to have a common sense of what the SSE is, and we look at the different national legislation, we usually have these 3 entities. Next. There are different frameworks for producing and harmonizing statistics on the SSE over the world. Here in chronological order, we see that an important work has been done by the Johns Hopkins Institute and Lester Salomon, which unfortunately passed recently. Our thoughts are with his family. There has been 2 major work done in the 2003 and 2006. In 2003, we have a handbook to produce statistics on the nonprofit institutions. And in 2006, we have a complementary manual to do the other part of the SSE, which are cooperatives and mutuals. In 2017, the ILO produced a conceptual framework for statistics on cooperatives, which led to adopting guidelines concerning statistics on cooperatives in 2018. However, in 2018, as well, a new handbook was produced for producing a satellite account of nonprofit institutions and some related enterprises, some cooperatives, but not all, and some mutuals, but not all, and some social private enterprise. So this is what we're going to discuss today. Next, please. If we look at what the 2003 handbook produced, it identified clearly how to spot and name nonprofit institutions across the systems of national account, which is the standard that is used by national statistic offices. Next. In 2006, next slide. There was one between. There was one past. In 2006, anyhow, the Syriac manual identified where are the cooperatives and mutual within the same system of national account. Next slide. The 2018 ILO work identified types of cooperatives in which different typology of cooperatives can be included in order to organize the information about cooperatives across the world. Next. So at that time, we have nonprofit institutions plus co-op and manual, and we can cover social economy. Next. But then here comes the TSE handbook, TSE for third sector or social economy. However, calling it social economy may be confusing because some, but not all, cooperatives and mutual societies are included in this framework. Some, but not all, for-profit, non-collective social enterprises are included, and are included some sectors that are traditionally excluded from the definition of the SSE, such as professional associations, political parties, worker unions, churches. So this handbook calls itself social economy, but covers a different spectrum. Next. Next slide, please. Previous slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so if we want to have a short picture of it, here are the different entities covered by different conceptual frameworks of the SSE: cooperatives, social economy, which include and exclude some part of nonprofit associations and foundations, social enterprise, which is a subset of the social economy, but some are non-collective and are not always included in the social economy, voluntary work outside of organizations, which is not always included in the definition of social economy. So what do we do with this? Next slide, please. An easy way is to use a modular approach. Why are we talking about a modular approach? Because it exists. It's been tested by Portugal. The satellite account of 2016, published in 2019, just said our definition of social economy is not the TSE handbook only, and it has to refer also to the Syriac manual. And so we'll combine, because we have in our social economy groups, Holy Houses of Mercies, Foundation, Association with Altruistic Goals, and cooperatives and mutual associations. Next slide, please. So there is a solution. So just to point out some strengths and weaknesses and maybe express some recommendations for future work. Next, please. So basically, there are two main visions of the SSE. One is the nonprofit third sector. So the basic organization, the typical organization is a nonprofit organization. It wants to capture the volunteerism and philanthropy inside the economy. The other vision is the social economy vision. It includes associations, but also cooperatives and mutual societies and similar. It captures a different way of producing economy in a more solidaristic way. In general, the legal definitions that you have in different countries cover, to various extent, both visions, and generally exclude non-economic, non-organized, and non-purpose, other than profit, non-purpose entities. Next slide, please. But the frameworks and for statistics on the SSE, if you look at the three manuals or handbook or the four, including the ILO 2018 on cooperatives, we see that the two 2003, 2016, and 2018 ILO can be combined to grasp the various national context of the SSE. But if you use the TSE handbook, which is, I have to say, the most advanced handbook, because it's a UN handbook and it's quite appealing, and it's supposed to help progress in standardization, it instead generates a bit of confusion because it assimilates the SSE only to the non-profit vision. And also, by including for-profit, which are owned and governed by non-user shareholders, social enterprises, it confuses the perimeter of the traditional social economy. And moreover, statistics of cooperatives were not integrated. The guidelines, the ILO guidelines were not integrated in the TSE 2018. So it remains an unsolved issue. Next slide, please. There's a problem in general of visibility of entities of the SSE in national statistics. They are present in household surveys and establishment surveys, but you don't know which entities are of the social economy. We have to mobilize governments and sector and convince national statistics offices of the importance of identifying cooperatives and other SSE entities in national surveys. In terms of national compatibility plus international comparability, which sometimes can be in conflict, we most often need to combine frameworks, such as the modular approach adopted by Portugal. For measuring the contribution of the SSE, the standard economic indicators sometimes poorly measure the contribution of the SSE, because the SSE is an alternative way of producing wealth and economic goods and services. So we need to do more research and to test indicators that will adequately assess the socioeconomic contribution of the SSE, namely the SDGs. Next slide, please. So some future work that we can think of. First, if there is a next edition of the UN 2018 Third Sector Handbook for the NPI and related institutions, please either remove social economy from the title or include all cooperatives and mutual societies in order to respect the legal definitions of the SSE in many countries of the world. We need to validate and adapt the frameworks through feasibility studies and ongoing testing. And for this, national governments have to get involved. They need to ask their NSOs to do this work, and there needs to be some coordination at the international level of these initiatives and between international statistical agencies and offices that do produce these standards, so that we don't have conflicting frameworks. And we need to clarify the concept of social enterprise versus any kind of corporate social responsibility. We need to clarify the concept for statistical purposes. And of course, further research for appropriate indicators of the social, economic, and environmental contribution of the SSE. So next slide, please. You can download our papers on the UN Task Force for the SSE website. And I leave the floor for my colleagues to talk about the two other studies that we produced. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. I hope the next edition of 2018 Handbook is going to be led by UN Statistics Division and UN Task Force, other than other institutions. Thank you very much. Let's go for Jerome Schoenmaker.
Yes, I'm there.
Right.
Perfect, thanks. I will try to share my screen and okay, so do you see my slides? I hope.
Yes.
And is it okay? Okay, perfect. So hello everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jerome Schoenmaker, and I'm project manager at CIRIEC, so the International Center of Research and Information on the Public, Social and Cooperative Economy. I'm also a professor at HEC Liège. And we built and co-wrote this research entitled Mapping International Social and Solidarity Economy Mapping Exercises with Colin Compère and Barbara Sack, respectively CIRIEC documentalist and managing director of CIRIEC International and CIRIEC Belgium. So as you know, of course, SSE can be or even should be a response to many contemporary societal challenges, and so without exhaustivity in environmental protection or the fight against health disparities and equal opportunities or exclusion. However, and as Marie has just explained, and so I will therefore not dwell on it, even if it's recalled in the paper, there is a lot of debate on practices of SSE, Marie just mentioned, and until recently, little effort was done to create statistical data. And Marie mentioned the different meetings that have in Europe recently, and the different works of Marie and her co-authors arrived to the conclusion that there is a need to clarify methodological challenges and to address them. And so we've just discussed about that. And so in our contributions that we were faced with this observation, and we wanted to construct, in order to construct this harmonized statistics, the goal was to create a comprehensive review of literature, which was relevant to statistical methodology and statistical data under SSE. And so our output, it's this, let's say, first mapping international SSE mapping exercises, and we focus on the more recent period, so 2015, 2020. So today we will focus on the three last parts of our research, and so I will present you quickly the three main data collection methods, then how we could classify them according to specific characteristics, and of course why these characteristics could be important and could be important especially for policymakers. And then I will present the limits of our exercise, and of course there will be a call for new exercise of this kind after. So after discussion between us, so the authors, Marie and Gabrielle, and the UNRISD project managers, we decided to divide the 30 mappings that we have discovered into three main types of data collection. And this is already our first and main classification characteristics. So the first one is administrative, legal, and institutional data containing statistical information where we can identify an SSE population, and this is very important, in a representative way. And so that can be done thanks to survey based on a representative stratified sample if we do not have any access to registers or to legal data. And so we would just like to highlight the fact that these mappings lie often at the regional level. So for instance, yes?
I think you do not move your slides, I think.
I think because from my perspective, that moves, but perhaps, let me try perhaps to stop, and I will try to share. I will share the integrality of my. So perhaps. Do you? And now?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Okay, so I will let it like this in order to perhaps even like this. Okay. So I just wanted to mention the fact that these mappings lie often at the regional level. So for instance, in Belgium or Quebec in Canada. And as it will be shown later, these regional and these national initiatives, we didn't take them into account since we decided together to focus on the international mappings. And so this is why they won't be present in our 30 mappings that you could see in our annexes. So the second type of data collection is international research on SSE, and we decided to divide this second data collection method in two big categories. The first one is the studies who try to compare the different weight of SSE across countries, for instance, the size of economic and the social contribution. And the second one is, let's say only, but it's not, of course, only, the research who try, the international research who try to understand SSE as a whole or some specific aspects of it. And so the first subtype of studies is the literature who's seeking to systematically review the analysis of national or representative statistical information on SSE in different countries, but really with the idea of comparison. And the second subtype are the works which focus on understanding SSE and its feature through a cross-country comparative study, but rather than the collection of perfectly representative statistical information. And so finally, but we will focus on these two first data collection methods in the rest of the presentation. But there is a third one, which is a thematic map, and it's of course often found on the internet. And such maps contain the information collected or deposited by the SSE organization themselves, and the goal is to visually depict various aspects of SSE. So that could be done by sector, by geographical region, or even by activities. Of course, you have this kind of search filters which are built in these thematic maps in order to help the readers to find the statistical information they seek. Okay, but as I told you, we will focus on the two first data collection methods in the remaining of the presentation. And so I just presented the main characteristics, but now we could move to the 7 other variables that we have taken into account, that we have used for classification, and I will present them by enumerating quickly the what and the why that could be useful for a researcher, for a national or international institution, or simply someone who would like to know more about the SSE. And so, of course, I will try to exemplify these characteristics for 2 specific mappings. So an important part of our work, let's say, we could say the empirical part, if we can call it like that, is the appendix, is the annexes of our research that you could download as Marie showed you. And because in this appendix, in this annex, for each mapping, we have characterized each mapping according to the 7+1 characteristic that I will present you just now. So the first one, the time range. Of course, we have temporality, we have information about data collection period, we have the information on periodicity. And why is it important? Because the policymakers could identify the most recent mappings, and that could provide information on development and innovation in SSE. And for instance, describe the newcomers, such as, and we have to, of course, discuss about that, as Marie mentioned, social enterprises or social business. As it would happen last year. Okay, so with respect to geographical scale and language, it's quite obvious, so I skip them, and I restart with the 4th characteristics, which is replicability. And in our sense, replicability means, first of all, the access to the author's methodology and the possibility of reproducing the exercise. And so, in fact, the majority of the mapping exercise that we have in this paper, it's replicable in this sense. Secondly, the second way we think about replicability, that means that we could have a consistency in numbers if we repeated this statistical accounting exercise. And so, for instance, but I will come back with XM in few minutes. In XM, although there is no real accounting of the precise number of a social enterprise and the respective weight or the respective size in the country, the methodology is well explained. And so you have the contribution of the country researcher, and then for the people who are in this conference, of course, they know the cluster creation from interviews in order to classify the social enterprises in the different countries. But by following the same methodology, the SSE statistics in other settings, for instance, and this number couldn't be produced. Okay, so the replicability variable provides policymakers with information. Why is it important? Because this replicability variable provides policymakers with information on methodologies that can be employed in different settings to produce statistics. With respect to the implementers, in reality, what we have seen, is that the review of the mapping exercise that involves a mix of both public and non-state actors in terms of funding, in terms of manpower, data source, or communication. And so, to highlight the source of the, intellectual contribution to mapping exercise, we decided to focus on the management of the mapping exercise, and in particular research. And that's quite important in order to see if there is a possibility of continuity in the research. The sector of economic activity I skip, and so finally, but we just debate about that with Marie. So there is this issue of scope, and with this issue of scope, we decided to try to have a graphical representation of the 30 mappings in the delineation that Marie has just presented just before. And so as you can see, the mapping exercise have been indexed by the code, and so you have, of course, to see the annex for for knowing which mapping corresponds to which research. Let's say that. And so this is really the first attempt to classify the different research efforts concerning the social economy, but in a broad sense. And this is the main, let's say, the main added value of this paper. Okay, so I give you some examples, and after that I will conclude. So, for instance, for S2, so the first, so it's about administrative, legal, and institutional data containing statistical information. Okay, for S2, so social economy in the European Union, you have the publication date, the data collection period. You can see that it's there is some periodicity in this research. The geographical scale, so Europe, the language. You have the scope, SSE, and the replicability column. You have the implementer, so it's Syriac and especially Syriac Spain, and that covers all activity, all economic activity sectors. What do we observe? What do we get as results? For instance, for S2, so for social economy in the European Union, in Belgium, we can see that thanks to this survey, this research, 9% of the paid jobs in Belgium are in the SSE. Okay, this is one of the example, of course, one of the figures that we can find in this research. Another example, E2, we have already presented XM just before in the presentation. We can see in the replicability column that we have the methodology, but we are not sure that we will have exactly the same results if we reproduce the exercise. And this is research institutes and all economic sectors are covered. It's, I think, one-shot exercise. And this is the kind of results that you can have. And so you can see that for the social business and cooperative, you have as most important social mission, ecology. For, of course, work integration, social enterprises, the riser, of course, the employment generation is one of the main social mission. So what we have seen in this research, what we have observed, is that there is an absence of standardized statistical concept, perhaps due to limited human resource, perhaps due to voluntarism, and that this voluntarism lead to the absence of representative sample. And so we do not observe statistically robust results. But as we mentioned in the paper, this is not especially an issue because it's not the core objective. So our little recommendation is that definitely more mapping exercises are needed and perhaps less Western-centered. So that could be a first step. And a second recommendation will be to have, but as Marie has mentioned, some concerted effort of private and public sector actors and stakeholders on designing and implementing research that should be a crucial process, which has to be prior to a comprehensive research and the production of statistics on a large scale. And so as a conclusion slide, it's just the table of the descriptive results that we have found in this research. What we can see is that the majority of the mappings that we have reviewed are not statistical compilation made by a public body. That's already interesting to see. As we see in the table, more than 50% are managed by research institutes or teams. This also explains the high number of one-shot exercise. And finally, if you look at the data collection method, so the first categorization variable, we observe a relatively small number, so 4 out of 30, of statistical production exercise of real SSE measurement. That means collection of data with the explicit purpose of counting the SSE organization and enterprises, and so finally measuring the rate of SSE within the economy. Okay, so I will let you download if you are interested the different papers, and I let the floor to Raphael, I think.
Thank you, Jerome. Let's suppose that you happen to have a friend who is working at a statistical office of the national government or local government, and your friend is interested in producing SSE statistics, and your friend asks you about the materials, about mapping exercises or statistical exercises in different countries. I think this paper is the one you have to recommend your friend to read and deliberate on. So let's move on to our last speaker, Rafael Chavez, who is going to talk about policy recommendations and future research on SSE statistics. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elchon. I comparto toda la pantalla, ¿verdad?
Si lo pones en grande, sí, y si no, probamos
Es
de
este,
otra manera.
pantalla completa.
¿Vale?
Es este.
Y ahora, si abres el PowerPoint, te saldrá. ¿Vale?
Es este. Vale. Y lo pongo así, ¿verdad? ¿Lo ves ahora? ¿Está bien? Sí. One moment, please. Permitir. Le pongo permitir. Aquí. Permitir.
Sí.
Y ahora, ¿verdad? Ahora está mostrando tu pantalla. Y ahora se ve. Y si la paso para adelante, se ve cómo van cambiando. De acuerdo. Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this 18 research conference of the EMES networks, in particular to Rocío Nogales, to Mark Nissen, who is the president of EMES, and of course Millán Díaz, who is the local organizer of the University of Zaragoza. This conference takes place in Teruel, which is this year the capital of the social economy in Spain. It is a small town with the population problems, and it is a very big challenge to attract events in the field of the social economy. Well, I would like also to thank Il Chung and Vic van Buren for the chair of this session, and of course the opportunity to explain this very interesting project carried out by the CIRIEC and the UNRIS, the United Nations Research Institute for the Social Development. In this research conference of EMES, in other plenaries, there were translation into Spanish. Then now we have only English, an English session. Well, and then I will speak in English. Well, my presentation is about the third paper, the third document, that is about the policy recommendation and direction for future research. I carried out with, directly, but with a very big help of most of it of Marie Bouchard and Il Chung. In fact, this third working paper is a guide for governments and for researchers. For governments interested in developing social economy statistics in their country, and for the researchers interested in working on improving and developing social and solidarity statistics. Well, this presentation is available in English and in Spanish. These are the links for them, and of course you have the links and the two presentations. The two former presentations have shown the links to access to the documents in the UNRIS website. Well, about this paper, the outline of it is as following. First, we are talking about why these kind of statistics are important. And second point is which statistics on the social and solidarity are needed. The third is about the entities that are involved in the production of these social and solidarity statistics. The fourth point is about the barriers in the production of the social and solidarity statistics. The fifth is about the policy that that need the social and solidarity statistic. And finally, the two last points are first, policy recommendation to build this statistic, and the last point is for the researcher, the future research agenda and action to improve this statistic. Well, let's go with the first point, that is, why are social and solidarity statistics important? Well, the more important message is that statistics are essential to guide the policy processes, making rational and evidence-based decision. Policy process for policymakers, but also for the actors of the social and solidarity sector or movements. And why? Because first, they help to make visible the social and solidarity area, to legitimize the social and solidarity as a new field of public action, and because they contribute in three ways the policies. First, to design the policy, aimed at promoting the social and solidarity, to a better implementation of these social economic policies, and to evaluate, to assess this policy by government, by the actors, and the society at the world. This importance is recognized by several bodies, by several governments, by bodies at national and international level. At the United Nations, and with bodies such as the UNRWA, the ILO, the United Nations Task Force for the Social and Solidarity Economy, all of this in the last years, from different governments in different continents, such as in Africa, in South America, and also in Europe. 11 national governments have supported the importance of this statistic, but also in Europe by different bodies such as the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, and the group of experts. In the statements, in different official documents, they recognize this the importance of this statistic. Well, I remember that just 2 months before, in the last report of the General Secretary of the General Assembly of the United Nations, there is also a point recognizing the importance of these statistics in general. Second point is about the statistics that are needed. Which statistic? Well, we can organize them in several groups. We have chosen this way of organization. First, the quantitative economic statistic on the social and solidarity within the framework of conventional economic aggregates and standard methodologies. The second is statistics that allow the quantification of the impact of the social and solidarity economy, not only in the economic field, but in the other social fields. And the third big group is the statistic allowing comparison at different levels and between social and solidarity, other economic entities, such as with the for-profit entities. And the comparison also in the time, comparing, for instance, the counter-cyclical activity in the face of the crisis, for instance. In this picture, you can see some other kind of aggregation and examples of the statistics that are needed. The third point is about the entities that should be involved in the production of these statistics? Well, perhaps we have in mind that the National Statistic Office has the monopoly of it, but not. Perhaps that should play a leading role or an important role, but they are not the only organization. Other are the government departments and agencies, for instance, the Labor Ministry, that have a lot of information, such as in Spain, for instance, the universities and other research centers, such as the CIEC International, for instance, representative social economy umbrella organizations at regional, national, and international level, and also some development agencies and other non-government entities promoting the social and solidarity in developing countries. All of them have their strengths and weaknesses in the production of this statistic, and in this paper we have defended that the activation of statistical technical working groups, the collaboration among them, can reduce the weaknesses of them. And in countries where some of them are inexistent, other can carry the production of this statistic in collaboration with the other. Fourth point is the barriers in the production, the main barrier in the production of the statistic. Well, in this slide, I have chosen the 5 main barriers. The first is the technical barriers, technical that refer to the delimitation and definition of the field of the statistical analysis. This problem, this technical problem, is important, is very important actually, because there are tensions that blur the field of the social economy, such as the paper of Marie Bouchard, the first of these 3 papers, have highlighted with the different concepts and visions about this field. And the second barrier linked to the technical barriers is about the process of production, the technical process of production of data from the system of raw data source, the process of processing and use the methodologies to produce aggregates, etc. The second barrier is about the skills, about the training of the people that have to produce this statistic. They need to have skills about precisely the concept, the delimitation, and the technical process of production and the methodology, the standards of the statistic. The third barrier is the institutional barrier, related to the rules, the existence of rules of normative mandate to push government and statistical institute to undertake the statistical endeavor. Because if we haven't got this mandate, it is very difficult that with a very voluntary will to carry this kind of statistic, and of course to institutionalize the standards of the delimitation of the field, of the production of the methodology that need also the institutionalization. The fourth barrier is finance, the funds, the lack of funds to carry statistics. Of course, as I said, with voluntarism, it is not possible to build the statistics. Then we need funds in an adequate way. And finally, the fifth barrier, main important barrier, is the policy support or the lack of policy support from the social economy sector in itself. if it not recognize the importance for their strategy, for their actions, it is very we have problems to carry this statistic. And what kinds of policy may social and solidarity statistics support? Well, we can aggregate that really in two big groups. The first one is the policy that address directly the development of the social and solidarity economy. Then the statistic help the development in the social solidarity economy in itself. And the other one are the policies, the general or sectoral policies that involve families or subsector of the field of the social and solidarity. And we can aggregate this policy in two groups: the sectoral and redistributive policies, such as the agri-food policy, the financial policy, social and health services, and other. And the other are the functional and territorial and environmental policies. All of them involve groups of cooperatives, of families of the social economy in the objectives and the instruments of this policy. And of course, the statistics in all of them are important for the legitimization, design, implementation, and evaluation of these policies. And finally, the sixth point is the recommendations. The recommendation first for the policymakers interested in the development of social economy statistics, and the last point is the recommendation for the agenda of the researcher. Let's go with the first part, is the recommendation for the policymakers. Well, these recommendations are very linked to the barriers. Then the first recommendation is for the policymaker is to establish a regulatory framework for national statistic organization and other statistic producers to activate a mandate to build statistics. The second is for the funds to establish an adequate and stable funding for this social and solidarity statistic. And the third, linked to the third barrier, is to set up a technical working group with experts from national statistic organization, research institute, user of statistics, and mechanism of coordination with other one to improve the skills, the relation of the people involved in the production of this statistic. The other recommendation is focused on the technical barriers, that is in the problem of the delimitation of the field, and then we need a national strategy, a national social and solidarity statistic strategy that include the methodology and guidelines that concrete the perimeter of the social economy in the country and the variables, indicators, and other guidelines. Then it should be explicit in this strategy. And after, we have other elements linked to the process of production. First, a diagnosis of the state of the statistic in the country, to set up that database with raw data, and just after the production, to produce them regularly in an harmonized way and to publish them in an efficient way. And finally, the areas of this agenda, of this research agenda to improve the social and solidarity statistic is as following as shown in the slide. First is to develop methodologies and guidelines to address the perimeter issues. This area was very well highlighted by the two former papers, the one of Marie and the other by Jérôme. The other is to improve the methodologies for the systematic collection and organization of this data. This is a problem of the technology, the statistic technology, and also to develop variables, indicators for the assessment and of the values and performance of the social and solidarity economy and visualization of its idiosyncrasy, to develop mechanism of performance and impact comparison between the social economy and other form of entities, to identify the different ways of publishing statistics and ways of models of regulation of the construction of the statistic and models of governance of the relation between the producers and the users of the statistics in the process of production of the statistics in order to be more efficient. Of course, to finish, you have to remember, as the other papers have shown, that you can download the 3 study in the web page of the UNISTED, the UNICE. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael. So we have had wonderful presentations of 3 papers produced by 3 excellent scholars into this project. And maybe I will open the floor, and if you have any questions or comments for 3 presenters, maybe you can raise those questions, and maybe we can ask them to answer those questions. I think you have a symbol of hand at the bottom, and if you have any questions, you can press on, you can click on that symbol. So we have question from Iran. So could you introduce yourself briefly and raise your question? Iran, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm Irene. I'm from Portugal, and I study social entrepreneurship and social innovation in Portuguese context. And I'd like to know a little bit about if you are considering the new indices that researchers are looking for to overcome the GDP dependence. If we are studying something broad like a statistical database, if we are considering this new index that are still in ongoing process.
Thank you very much for that question. I mean, Irene asked about any research on the efforts to overcome GDP-centered statistics to measure economic relations and activities. Okay, thank you very much. And Comité has a question. So could you introduce yourself and raise your question? I will collect 2 or 3 questions first, and then we can have a floor for presenters. Comité?
But Comité is Marie. Comité is Marie.
Really? Okay, so if we do not have any more questions, maybe we can go to Marie or Raphael or Jérôme. Okay, I will open the floor for presenters. So Marie, you have answer to that question, right? So
Well,
floor is yours, Marie.
Yeah. Not necessarily an answer to that excellent question. I think we are not the only ones asking ourselves this question. Just a short answer about how to measure the GDP usually is to use the value added produced by the enterprises. And there is a problem with measuring the contribution of the SSE through the value added, because the value added is not positioned exactly in the same place in the accountancy of the firm. Part of it has been pre-distributed to producers who bring their products to the cooperative, or it's been redistributed to consumers through patronage refunds. So if you look at the productivity or the value added of a cooperative, let's say, compared to a similar enterprise, you will not calculate it the same way. So there is a misrepresentation of the value added of the SSE entities inside the global value added, which is the way to one of the ways to measure the GDP. And of course, GDP in itself has a lot of problems, as we all know. I don't think that you can solve the problem by just researching social and solidarity economy, but I think that researching social and solidarity economy might give good ideas for the standards and statistics to include different ways of measuring this contribution. There is this discussion about this measurement of economic contribution of cooperatives in research that was conducted for the ILO on cooperatives, and that can be found on the website of SIRIEC. I will find it and put it in the chat for you to find. That would be my answer for now.
Thank you very much. Raphael, Jérôme, do you have anything to add? No? Within UN system, there is a group called Alternative Economist Network. And they are talking about different alternative approaches in economics, like a popular economy, creative economy, social and solidarity economy, and circular economy. And one of the issues they are dealing with is to move away from GDP measures, because we know all those problems of GDP, like what Marie just mentioned, and others can be, impossibility to measure all those non-economic activities with economic impact, like a domestic labors within the household and whatever. So there is a kind of discussion, and it's a long-standing discussion in economics. So I think we have to make an effort to systematically articulate all those different approaches to overcome GDP-centered statistics and assemble all those different brilliant ideas to make an alternative approach to GDP. Thank you very much for that question. Do we have any other questions or comments? If not, I'd like to make very... okay, we have one question from Madita. Madita, floor is yours. Please introduce yourself briefly and raise your question.
Yeah, can you see and hear me well?
Yeah, I can see you and hear you clearly.
Perfect. My name is Madita Rabe. I'm from Kassel University International Center for Development and Decent Work. I'm not sure if I made up my mind properly about my question, but I'll try. So what I was wondering is, if we want to measure and produce statistics about SSE, we need to be very precise about definitions, and the definitions of SSE are quite contested. And I think, in the long run, or even in the short term, it does make a difference which conception of SSE we're using. And I was wondering, since right now we're at the conjuncture somehow of mainstreaming SSE, the EU is involved, OECD is involved, UN is involved. So there are lots of actors involved right now in this process, and everyone is kind of, at least that is my impression, pushing for their own conception, theoretical conception of SSE. And I was just wondering whether you all, since you're all more in the field than I am as a student right now, could clarify a little bit, like, how is the discourse right now about this issue, and what are maybe the frontiers and so on? Because I think in the end, that will make difference what theoretical assumptions our statistics will be based on.
Thank you very much. Marie, Raphael, Jérôme, Anybody who can answer the question?
I could start. I'm sure Jérôme and Raphaël will have things to say as well. Thank you for this excellent question. There are issues. It is a competition for definition, but you can partly solve that by an intellectual work on what is consistive of these definitions. As I mentioned, there are 2 or 3 major streams that identify what is the SSE, and depending on which stream you are looking at, you will have a different definition and therefore a different perimeter of the SSE. What is more confusing? I mean, it's either a non-profit, non-distribution version, or it's a pre- and redistribution limited profit version of the SSE. In terms of statistics, of course, I'm not talking about sociology or anthropology, but once you go over the border, including social enterprises, which can be for-profit, shareholders. Well, you introduce a confusion where you may lose the concept of the SSE at a certain point. Everything will be SSE, and this is the big tension that we have to look at. Not so much amongst ourselves, us promoters of the SSE, but between us, the promoters of the SSE, or the actors, the sector of the SSE, and this new trend, which may lead to some dilution of the concept of the SSE. It would be great if, while mainstreaming the SSE, it would mean that the whole of the economy would become more social and more solidarity-based. But it would be a shame if by mainstreaming the SSE, we would reduce the complexity of the SSE and make it so that it would be confusable with any type of capitalist organization that does pretend or does some social or environmental good at some point in its organizational life. I think that's the issue.
Thank you very much, Marie. Jérôme, Raphaël, do you have anything to add? No? I think the conceptual issue is very interesting from the perspective of development. UN is dealing with organizations on the ground. And organizations on the ground, especially in developing countries, have very complicated forms sometimes. And it is not easy to tell whether it is SSE or for-profit. They have mixed nature. So to me, definitions should be classified in different contexts. You have normative definition, you have practical or operational definition, and you have statistical definition. And of course, you have different members in different areas or arenas, I would say, because there is a struggle, there is a tension. So when you talk about normative definition of SSE, you have some focus on different aspects of SSE, its values, its principles, its memberships, and rules and regulations about distribution. When you have operational definition, you have different standards, because by definition, operational definition is much more focused on operations on the ground. So it has much more willingness and intention to include or to steer organizations on the ground to the principles and values of SSE. And statistical definition, every country has different intention and will in terms of statistics of SSE organizations. Some countries would want to include some social enterprises which have more profit-oriented intentions because of national strategy to expand social and solidarity economy areas or boundaries. And some countries would have much more focus on cooperatives nature of SSE because mainstream economy is already dominated by cooperatives like in Barcelona or those small big provinces in certain countries. So I would suggest, especially to those scholars and students, to classify different areas of definitions. When you deal with normative concepts, you have to deal with normative definitions and discourses in normative areas. And when you are engaging with actual organizations on the ground for development purpose, you have to have different standards. But in dealing with all these different dynamics and discourses in different areas, you have to know more about the differences between different definitions and lines delineating one from another. So I think our papers introduce all those different definitions and discourses, especially with a focus on statistical definition. So this is kind of a remark from the perspective of practitioners who are dealing with development issues on the ground, especially related to social and solidarity economy as an alternative economy to for-profit maximizing neoliberal kind of economic discourses. Okay, do we have any other questions? If not, maybe I can go back to my lay person's question. Suppose you have a friend who is at the top of policy-making process in some countries, and he or she wants to know more about other countries' examples, especially a model case of statistical exercise or development in SSE area. And if she or he asks you to recommend just one country as a model, which country it would be and why? Maybe let's go for Jerome first. Jerome, which country it would be as a model case of statistical development for SSE and why?
Yes, but I think that Marie has already mentioned the fact that for the moment Portugal seems to work very well, and so I would definitely recommend this country. But yes,
Portugal.
Yes, Portugal. I think.
Okay, Rafael, do you agree?
My vote is also for Portugal.
Okay, great. And Marie already said Portugal. Okay, what would be the second best? No, Marie, no. Okay, Marie, the floor is yours.
It's a strange question, but of course, if you have a country where there is a legislation on cooperatives, I would say just go with the legislation on cooperatives, because that is the definition that you are going to be reporting on. And you need to apply the definition, the legal definition of cooperatives or of social economy, if you have a legal framework, so that you can apply it in the statistics, the national statistics. The issue of having one best country is impossible because the world is made of so many different types of countries. And the efforts in producing national statistics is not equal amongst countries. So it would be absurd to say to a country in Asia or in Africa or in Latin America somewhere to use the same framework as Portugal. First of all, Portugal did spend a lot of resources in producing the satellite accounts. I am not even sure that in Portugal, this is feasible on the long run or every 5 years. So the question is more, if you allow me to reformulate it, can you do an inventory of the resources that are available in your country? The existing information about what is called social economy or what is called the type of economy that is social and solidarity economy in your country, and try to look at these resources and see if you can mobilize them, if you can trust them. And if you can mobilize them, and if there is a bit of seriousness, robustness in methodology, still identify if there are failures in that methodology, in this robustness, so that you can say, to what extent can I trust these figures? Are they just indicative of a trend, or are they precise enough that I can design public policy addressing a certain number of organizations with a certain weight or certain size? And that will be different from one country to another. I'd also say, mobilize the sector. The sector usually knows what's going on in their sector, and they will have different ways of identifying, measuring, calculating. But if you work with the sector, you may foster, you may promote some harmonization of data so that you can eventually accumulate. I would also say, well, work with UNRIST or work with researchers somewhere else, basically in your country, to start with, so that you can get some help in identifying what is crucial in naming or identifying these entities. If in your country it's entrepreneurship, because you need small producers to get together and to join into a cooperative so that they can organize their production and get the most wealth redistributed in the territory, if that's important in your country, that's what you should be looking at. The basic thing that I'm saying, and to conclude, do not let an international organization tell you what to do, but do ask international organizations to help you organize your data. This is basically what I'm saying. International organizations should coordinate among each other and make it so that it's feasible inside countries to produce statistics on the SSE. That is a big challenge, but this is the challenge that is ahead of us.
So do you mean that international organization does not have to have a standard?
No,
standard?
That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that they need to collaborate amongst each other so that the efforts can join and not produce different types of standards that are not compatible or that do not take the other one into account.
But by definition, I think the international standard should be a uniform standard, which should be followed by different countries to have global level data sets. Otherwise, you cannot compare different countries.
That's what is the situation right now. You have different definitions of the SSE, which are included differently in different international standard frameworks. The
problem is international standards are multiple and they do not have uniform standard. That is the problem.
No,
not the
they do have uniform standards, which are the international and acknowledged standards for producing statistics. That is standardized.
No, I'm talking about SSE statistics.
What you don't have is the definition of the SSE that is compatible. You don't grasp the same entities. Coming back to Madita's question, how do you decide which entity you should include? I believe that it should be based on the legal definition of the country, and that's why Portugal is exemplary, because they were supposed to use one framework, and they said, no, we're going to use two frameworks. It's going to cost us more, and we'll have to pay ourselves for it, but we're going to use two frameworks because the one that is proposed to us by an international regional organization does not fit our legal definition. And so that's why we're saying that frameworks cannot overpass legal definitions inside a country or even regional definitions inside an area of the world.
Thank you very much. Very wise answer to stupid question. The reason why I posed that stupid question is related to my job. My job within UN system is translate academic knowledge into policy relevant knowledge, which can be used by policymakers. As you know, policymakers do not like one-handed economists because that they like one-handed economists, because if they have both hands, they always say like on the one hand, on the other hand, and it confuses policymakers. So they like one-handed economist. That is something very much relevant to my questions, because they don't ask about statistics or knowledges underpinning statistics or whatever. They ask, okay, which country is the model we have to follow? And they ask their staffs to research about that country. So I assume that all those participants are from academics, academia or students or professors. And whenever you meet policymakers, whenever you have a discussion with policymakers, do not begin with theories and concepts. You have to start with empirical cases like, okay, the best country in the world is Portugal. And why? Because such and such. And then policymakers will link you to the stops, and you can explain in more details to their staff, not policymakers, especially those guys at the top. So that is based on my experience, and that is why I posed stupid question like that. Okay, thank you very much for your participation. It was a small group, but this session will be published online, and you can recommend this session to your friends, especially policymaker friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chang, for your.
Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.